Good evening. It's a wet Wednesday, May 24th here in Raleigh, North Carolina. I hope it's dry where you are. You're out of the weather anyway. Welcome to the live streaming Lessons of Vietnam show here from Nissan Communications International Headquarters. I'm your host, Bill Dixon, with Amnon Nissan doing production, control, everything else. He does all the hard work. I just sit here and talk to y'all. The last couple of shows we did, or actually the last three shows we did, were on atrocities going on in Vietnam on both sides. Kind of heavy, so I thought maybe tonight I'd loosen up a little bit and do something a little easier on the heart and spirit and so forth. It's going to be two parts tonight when we get to it. And so what we're going to do is, by the way, I want to ask y'all a question. How many of y'all out there in the audience know the difference between Armed Forces Day, which was May 20th, Memorial Day, which was May 29th coming up, and June 11th, Veterans Day? Okay. You know the answer? Armed Forces Day is the day we think about, celebrate, commemorate all the men and women who are serving us today in our country. Memorial Day, this coming Monday, is the day we reflect on all the men and women who have lost their lives fighting for our freedoms in this country. So if you see a veteran or an active duty person on Monday, probably wouldn't be a good idea to walk up to them and say, Happy Memorial Day. Because Memorial Day is where we honor those who died for us. A nice Memorial Day, whatever you want to call it. And of course, Veterans Day is where all the veterans who have served all the different wars the United States has been in. So just wanted to kind of find out, because everybody always has a problem with Memorial Day and Veterans Day and what they were and so forth. You see there, you see the information, unless you're on by a phone. Come in on with us on Skype at Computers 2K Voice or 919-518-9773. And be sure and log in so if you have a comment, we know who you are and so forth. And anything I say on this show does not reflect anything or opinions of any veterans organization. They're strictly mine or whoever our guests are. Nissan Communications is not responsible for it. I'm a big boy. I'll take the responsibility of anything out there, but hopefully nothing that I'm doing that's not true. I'm trying to bring you the real story of the men and women who served in Vietnam with all the BS that you find on websites and so forth. I get it from talking to other vets, doing different research and so forth. So I'm trying to bring you the real stuff and not the overeducated stuff and so forth. Tonight's show is going to be in two segments. Part one is the selective service and the draft. Oh, I love those people. And then the part two is we're going to talk about the American flag, because Flag Day is coming up. In fact, our next show will be June 14th, and that is Flag Day. So I'm going to go ahead and give you all the information you need to know. As the 911, as they say, all the information about, or 411, I guess it is, all the information about the flag and how to fly it and when to fly it and that sort of stuff. So first, we're going to talk about the selective service mission. I hope everybody out there realizes that wonderful things about turning 18 in North Carolina. I think you can start drinking then, but you also get to sign up for the selective service or the draft. Now, what is the mission of the selective service? The selective service, as they say here, to furnish manpower to the Defense Department during national emergency, to manage alternative services for men classified as conscientious objectors, and register with only a few exceptions all male citizens and male immigrants. I did not realize the immigrants were supposed to register until I read this, and anybody from 18 through 25. And it's amazing some of the people that are required to register and so forth. So the draft actually started during the Civil War. The first military conscription means they bring you whether you want to go or not, act in 1863 during the Civil War. And the thing about it was that it was kind of strange draft back then. It was here it says President Abraham Lincoln drafted men between 20 and 45. Actually, the South started to draft men before Abraham Lincoln did. The interesting part of the military draft law and the Civil Service Act, which went into effect in 1917 and gave President Woodrow Wilson the authority to conscript men for World War I. But going to go back real quick to what I was just talking about, the Civil War. The draft, when it first came in, was not exactly well received back then either. The Selective Service laws written now refers specifically to male persons in stating who must register and who would be drafted. Right now, women who do not have to register, young girls. For women to be required to register with the Selective Service, Congress would have to amend the law. And as of today, there is a bill in Congress trying to allow women to be drafted or they have to register anyway. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that later on in the show. Now let's go back to the first draft. The Draft Act of 1863 was the first instance of compulsory service in the federal military services. All male citizens, as well as aliens who declared the intention of becoming citizens between 20 and 45, were at risk of being drafted. No married man could be drafted until all the unmarried had been taken. That didn't work so well back in the 60s because I was married 3 years, and I'm still getting ready to get drafted. There were two methods back then to avoid the draft. You could hire a substitute. In other words, if you had enough money, you could go in and say, I don't want to go in and fight the Civil War. I'll pay you to go in. Now, it says here, it paid $300. As the war went on, it went up to about $1,000. So you can get out of the draft by just paying somebody else to go in your place, a substitute. Okay. Which is, as you can see from the picture here, the draft riot of 1863. See, all y'all sitting out there thought there was no riots and so forth and protests going on before the 60s. No, it started way before that. The draft riots of 1863, and guess where they were? They were in New York City. The first draft was published, and the lower class people in New York said, "Wait a minute now, we that's not fair." And the Democrat Party back then was a lot different than it is now, but they weren't too crazy about the whole idea of President Lincoln and what he could do about the war. So there was a lot of protests going on and burning and looting and so forth. But next one, please. Now, Warner, a substitute, they actually had a song. This is a cover sheet from the original music for Warner the Substitute. A song commenting on the practice of hiring substitutes to fulfill one's service obligation in the American Civil War. As you can see, it was how it was written by and so forth. But they came out with a song getting people to take your place and so forth. And obviously that the wealthy man didn't have to necessarily have to go to war. It was just a poor man or so forth who went to war. Because if you had enough money, if you're wealthy and had enough money, you could buy somebody out. Now, one of the interesting things about the whole thing was Abraham Lincoln, because of his age, and he was also the president, he would not have been drafted. But he wanted to make a point, so he actually paid a guy to be his substitute, and he paid him $500. His name was Summerfield Staples, and he went in to replace, actually this was his second time in. He had gone in and forgot exactly why he got out or whatever, but his time up had gone in, so he went back in a second time, and this is actually the form he signed. And I think it's interesting, if you look through there, the word substitute has been marked through, and then it says volunteer enlistment. So he was officially, I guess, not a substitute for Abraham Lincoln, but he was the volunteer enlistment. But officially he was paid as a substitute. Now, after a while, as they started needing more people, they started going, well, especially in the South, you had these guys, about honorary Southern colonels, and everybody's an honorary Southern colonel down here. They started going to guys who got together and said, "I'm gonna form my own militia and fight the Civil War." So they were running ads like this one: avoid conscription, join my group. My group is special because I'm the leader. Join my group and fight for North Carolina. All the people in my group are going to be from North Carolina. You fight with your buddies, and that's how you avoid being drafted. You come fight with us. And it changes. It went to 3 years of service, and they went from 18 to 35. And as it went on, they went from 17 to 50. So they still were a lot of exemptions and so forth coming along. Now, the first recruiting poster, "I want you," with Uncle Sam pointing his finger at you, was done for 1917 by Montgomery Flagg for World War I, when they first started to doing posters, and so forth. And the United States had a peacetime army, or just over 100,000 men. The reinstitution of conscription was unsurprising result of U.S. entry into World War I. In April 1917, the Selective Service Act signed by President Woodrow Wilson on May 18, 1917, created a selective service system, which was demanded induction of some 2.8 million men into armed forces over the next 2 years. And it abolished the much maligned substitution system. In other words, they would take, whether you were rich or poor, supposedly you could get drafted. I can tell you, with the selective service system, that didn't necessarily mean that if you were wealthy that you couldn't get out of the draft, okay? They initially targeted the male citizens 21 to 30, but eventually went to 18 to 45. American armed forces demobilized after the armistice. That's when the peace treaty was signed in November of 1918. And the number of men under arms diminished to the pre-war levels. In other words, it went back to about 100,000. As you can see, way back, I didn't even realize Bob Hope went back far back, but you can see Bob Hope and Dorothy Lamour, who was a big actress then, was also did posters and so forth out selling war bonds. They were caught in the draft. As World War II raged in Europe and Asia, Congress narrowly passed the Selective Training and Service Act. In other words, the United States wasn't in the war yet, so people are saying, "Well, why should we go back into registering and drafting and so forth?" President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed the bill into law on September 16, 1940, and all males 21 to 36 were required to register. And they brought back out the selective service system. But this time, which they had not done before, they brought out a provision for conscientious objectors. Those are people whose religion, or for whatever reason, most of religion, like Quakers and so forth, who did not feel through the religion it was something they could do to pick up arms and go out and fight and kill other people. That is a contentious group. It's probably misunderstood, misused, overused, and so forth. But that's when World War II is when it first came in, and 45 million men registered, 10 million were inducted through the selective service system between 1940 and 46. To process registration and administration to draft, the local draft board were set up from coast to coast. Each of the 6,443 boards assigned each of the registrants in its district a number. Then a national lottery was held. Now, I did not realize that the World War II was on lottery. I thought it was more like the draft that I was in when in the early 60s. But it did have the lottery, and in Washington, papers were with the numbers 1 through 7,863 were printed, and on them were put into capsules, one number to a capsule. Then they were dumped into a giant fishing bowl had used for the same purpose in World War I draft. And they wanted us to make this. They wanted to make this really special as far as the public and so forth. So the men holding the numbers that followed in the lottery were brought in until the service had been filled. All the men whose numbers were up received an order to report for induction. In other words, as soon as your number was called, they were ready for you to come in. You went to your draft board. Now, how did that work? Later on, I'll tell a little bit later on it was by each draft board had a quota of how many people they had to bring in. But with the lottery system, it was basically the draft board took the people whose lottery numbers were up and helped get them going and so forth, which was with the lottery. Here's the interesting things about how you could get out of it. Of course, you had to go in and pass a physical exam just like you do now. A man had to be at least 5 feet tall and no taller than 6.5 feet. In other words, 6'6", anybody over 6'6", they wouldn't take in. He had to be at least 105 pounds, have vision correctable with glasses, and have at least half your teeth. I thought that was an interesting part. You have half your teeth, and you couldn't be convicted of a crime, which let out a lot of the soldiers in the 60s. And you had to be able to read and write. I would think that along about that time, there was a lot of people who got out because they suddenly couldn't read and write. There were several reasons a man could be sent home. He couldn't pass the medical exam for whatever reason. I know that John Wayne, for instance, who was, for younger people, he was the macho movie star of our time, made all the war movies and everything else, and the westerns. It's hard to believe he started out as a singing cowboy, but he failed the draft physical. He had a bum knee from college football, so they wouldn't take him. So you could get out physically. And back in World War II, a black man were passed over altogether. They weren't even considered as equal to the draft. They were considered that they didn't have the ability to fight. They were worried about they would run and so forth. And later on in the 60s, during the Vietnam War, of course, we proved that they were equal to anybody else out there. So they were not drafted. You could join, but you end up in food service or something like that and so forth. So you didn't have as many. But you also had certain occupations. If you worked in a war factory making planes or ammunition or that sort of stuff, you could get out of being in a draft. And also, because it was in your local draft board, you could have a friend on the draft board and they just kind of forgot you. You could slip through the crack, which is part of the problem with the draft. And inductees who passed all the scrutiny, I knew I could say that word, were taken to service right away. In other words, when you got your draft notice and they brought you down to the induction center to get your physical and everything, you were supposed to bring 3 days of clothes with you, because if you passed it, you were on the train or the bus right then to go to boot camp and so forth. Now the selective. Okay, next one. Next one. All right, keep going. Was a duplicate? Well, should be. There you go. Wonder how that got there. I might have, huh? All right. Anyway, the Selective Training and Service Act expired in March of 1947 after the war. But President Harry S. Truman, if you look at the picture right there, his famous saying on his desk, "The buck stops here." He actually fired one of the number one generals of the military. In fact, he was the general of the military, MacArthur, and who thought he was the greatest general in the world. If you didn't think he was, just ask him. He'd tell you. But MacArthur ended up firing him. But he was concerned about the peacetime army, whether it could track the numbers that it needed to uphold its global commitments. So he pushed for an extension of the draft. And of course, Congress agreed, and the Selective Service Act was reactivated in June of 1948. A flood of volunteers prompted the Selective Service System to unofficially suspend the act with a draft holiday. In other words, when we entered Korea, there were so many Americans coming forward saying, "I'll go into the service." They didn't have to have the draft right off to start with. So they had a draft holiday from 48 till early 1959. It was scheduled to expire in June of 1950, but the outbreak of the Korean War that month prompted Congress to extend it for another year. The Selective Service Act was reauthorized in 1951 as the Universal Military Training and Service Act. Boy, that's a mouthful. And all males 18 through 26 were required to register for the draft. More than 1.5 million men were inducted into the armed services during the Korean War. An additional 1.5 million were inducted between 1954 and 1961. In 1946, President Harry Truman appoints an amnesty board to review cases of conscientious objectors who were imprisoned after refusing to serve during World War II. As you remember a while ago, I mentioned that the conscientious objector opened up a new can of worms, people who were claiming to be conscientious objectors who didn't even know what a conscientious objector was. Some of them were put in jail. Some of them were treated very badly. In fact, there's a movie out recently, having a senior moment. The name of the movie escapes me, but you ought to go out and see it. This young man was a conscientious objector. They tried all through basic training to get him to change his mind. They short-sheeted him. They beat him up. But he said he continued with it and so forth. And then they were in a big battle with the Germans, and it's amazing what this man did as a conscientious objector. He saved over 60 men with the Germans looking for him, knew he was there and they couldn't find him. It's something Ridge. It's not Heartbreak Ridge, but it's a fantastic movie out there. But he started looking into all these people, somewhat like we're doing today. Today, the government's going back and looking at people out from the 60s of the Vietnam War who got bad conduct discharges or bad papers, we say, because of quite possibly post-traumatic stress, which didn't exist back then. But anyway, what we're talking about here is the people who were World War I draft dodgers in 1933. And in preparation for the Second World War, Roosevelt tried to avoid jailing conscientious objectors, offering them opportunity to participate in the domestic civil service program. That's something I'd like to see come in for the whole country, is a domestic civil service program. But he had work farms and in hospitals and so forth. 25,000 men took this, kind of like the early Peace Corps to a certain extent, but 15,000 of them chose not to support the war effort or not to take anything to do with this. So quite a few of them were charged with violating the federal conscription and laws and put in jails and so forth. So he wanted to make sure that a legit conscientious objector was not had stigma and so forth and on him and so forth. So in his spirit of forgiveness, he appointed the board to review individual cases of those who were jailed with the idea that anyone who had been unjustly punished would be pardoned. These are the people with conscientious objection now. A year later, the board reported back to Truman of the 15,000 violators of the World War II Selective Service Act, only 1,500 of them were considered entitled to full amnesty. In other words, there were 1,500 out of 15,000 were truly conscientious objectors and should not have been jailed or whatever they did to them. So, most were members of the historic pacifist religious sects such as the Quakers and the Mennonites. So on December 23rd, 1947, Truman granted pardons to those 1,500 men and restored their political and civil rights. Those who had originally been jailed as convicted felons lost voting rights and even after their release were prevented from obtaining certain jobs or holding public office. That's the rest of the, that's the 13,500 who didn't do their part for the country. Now, during the Vietnam War, President Lyndon Johnson chose not to run for re-election in 1968 for lots of different reasons. And the following year, his successor, President Richard M. Nixon, signed an amendment to the Military Selective Service Act that returned the selection by lottery to the draft process. During World War I, with all the changes, the lottery went away, and it was more of the draft board in your particular area having a quota. I'm a North Carolina native. My draft board was out of Wilson, North Carolina, and each month, each of those draft boards are all across the country that we talked about a while ago. Each one of them had a quota. So they would look at their list of people who were eligible and fill their quota. Now, as I mentioned before, there were, if you had the right friend or you passed the right a buck to somebody, you could your name could fall off that list for the quota. So it wasn't exactly the fairest thing in the world. Getting a lot of bad press and so forth. So Nixon brought back in 1968, 69, actually when it got started, he went back to the lottery. Because the lottery was not very, the draft was not very good, got a lot of bad press with the public and so forth. So, but 1965 to 1973, some 1.7 million were inducted into the armed forces through the selective service system.
Paul saying he thinks the movie was
Hacksaw Ridge, that's it. That's it. If you ever had a chance, it is an absolutely fantastic movie. What this man went through and his convictions, he stuck with them. They did everything they could do to get him out of the service, to get him not to get out, drop out, to carry a weapon or whatever, and the man stick with his convictions. Fantastic movie. Get it on Netflix or rent it somewhere, or if you can find it somewhere, go see it.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. I can always depend on Mr. Paul White. And the Vietnam lotteries. The lottery drawing, the first since 1942, was held in December 1st, 1969. Now, I didn't worry about the lottery because I had come home by then. I'd already gone and done my thing. I joined the Army to beat the draft. That sounds kind of dumb, I know, but, well, it was, yeah. But a recruiter promised me a lot of things that hadn't happened yet. But at the Selective Service National Headquarters in Washington, D.C., this event determined the order of call for induction during calendar year 1970. That is for registrants born between January 1st, 1944, boy, I fit in that one good, and December 31st, 1950. The reinstitution of the lottery was changed from the draft, the oldest man first method, as we talked about a while ago, with the lottery, which had been a determined method for deciding order of call, to the lottery. And it was televised. It was a big thing. And there were 366 blue plastic capsules. 1969 and 1970 must have been a leap year because of 366 days instead of 365. Containing birth dates placed in a large glass container and drawn by hand to assign order of call numbers to all men. It was like a bingo game. Give me B14. Within the range of 18 to 26 age range and so forth. With radio, film, and TV coverage, the capsules were drawn from the container open and the dates inside are posted in order. Don't you know that was a popular TV show that day?
I was watching George, what's his name with the cigar?
George Burns.
George Burns show this week, and he went about this guy, the last name started with a Z. And he said he always was last in everything. So sometime in the early 60s, he decided he's going to change his name and got a last name with an A.
Yeah.
So, of course, he was first to get drafted. And then he went in the military, and he didn't like that every time they called somebody, they call him first.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So he changed his name to a Z. So he was the last one to get released.
Yeah, a lot of stories like that. The first one by Congressman Alexander Perney, Republican from New York, of the House Armed Services Committee, contained the date September 14th. So all men born on September 14th in any year between 1944 and 1950 were assigned lottery number 1. The drawing continued until all days of the year had been paired with sequence numbers. And you can see on the sheet here, this kind of gives you an idea. If you were born on January 1st, your lottery number was 305. Boy, you could celebrate that. But if you were born in February 1st, anytime during that time, start packing because you were number 86. But if you were born November 1st, you probably already had your bags packed a week before because you were the first one going in on the 19th of November. So that's how the lottery worked, and it was posted, so you just went by your birth date. During that same period, an estimated 500,000 men dodged the draft through methods but both elaborate, fleeing the country and simply refusing to respond to conscription notices. Ultimately, 200,000 men were charged with draft invasion, and some 8,000 were convicted. You start wondering what happened to the other 192,000 people, but only had 8,000 convicted. On January 27, 1973, the Department of Defense announced that it was suspending the draft, and the Military Service Act expired that June. So they won't even have the lottery after January 27, 1973. But along came Jimmy Carter. On January 21st, 1977, had one of his first actions. He issued a blanket pardon for all those who had evaded the draft during the Vietnam War. Boy, I liked when I heard that. Oh, yes. Amnesty applied only to those civilians who had refused induction and not to the thousands of servicemen who had deserted or gone absent without leave, which was later changed. Actually, Gerald Ford, if I remember correctly, gave them all amnesty. So the people who went to Canada or whatever, Jimmy Carter said you were still bad boy, but Gerald Ford kind of took care of that. In response to the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, Carter reactivated the Military Selective Service Act by executive order. We hear a lot about executive orders lately, hadn't we? I didn't realize that anybody started doing it until about Bush, but it looks like we go all the way back to Jimmy, who did the executive order on July 2nd, 1980. While it did not mandate military service, it did require that all males aged 18 to 26 registered with the Selective Service System. Now, how many of you 18 to 26-year-olds out there hadn't registered yet? You don't? You better get out there. All right. Let's talk about some prominent figures who didn't go. Oliver Stone is a Vietnam vet. He served at least 2 tours in Vietnam. His lottery number was 113. Pat Sajak. You ever heard of Pat Sajak? A little thing called Wheel of Fortune, America's Game. His lottery number was 007. He was one of those that was in a rush. Bruce Springsteen, the boss, his number was 119. And was also against the war pretty strongly. How about Sylvester Stallone? Rambo. Rambo was 327th. How much chance he went? Samuel Alito, 32. Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court, 109. Dan Quayle, Vice President under the first Bush, wasn't he?
I don't remember.
He was vice president. Paul, I need you again. Clarence, Dan Quayle, Al Gore, who was vice president and ran for president. He's the one that sells you carbon credits. He was 30, but he did go in. Bill Clinton, his number was 311. George W. Bush was 327, but he did serve in the National Guard. Billy Crystal, who is the MC of the award show, one of the many award shows, he was 354. David Letterman, 346. Sometimes when you read these names, you go, how did they get such a large number? Tom Daschle, 43. Tom DeLay, 312. Jay Leno, 223. Mayor Rudy Giuliani, 308. Stephen King, the author, 204. Donald Trump, 356. Well, he didn't go. O.J. Simpson, he should have had a lower number. Maybe he wouldn't be in jail now. O.J. Simpson, 277. Bill Murray, the actor, Caddyshack, so forth, 204th. That's just kind of got an idea how the lottery works. But today's selective service, there is no draft.
First Bush.
Huh? And the George, the first Bush. All right, the selective service system that still remains in place today there's some things in this one that kind of surprised me. That almost all male United States citizens and male immigrants who are 18 through 25 are required to register with the Selective Service. With few exceptions, all males between 18 and 25 must register with the Selective Service system within 30 days of arriving in the United States. This includes U.S.-born and naturalized citizens, parolees, undocumented immigrants. Let me read that again. Undocumented immigrants are supposed to register. That kind of doesn't get talked about a whole lot in the press, does it? Undocumented immigrants and so forth. But they're supposed to register for the draft, which kind of strange because then you would know they were undocumented, but then they would be documented because they registered. So if you're undocumented and you register for the draft, does that mean that you're now documented? Anyway, that's something for smarter brains than me. Legal permanent residents, asylum seekers, refugees, and all males with visas of any kind which expired more than 30 days ago. The few individuals who are exempt from this requirement are those on current non-immigrant visas. If you're here to work or whatever, or student, you don't have to register. Now, this has got a part that kind of surprises me too, but they even got transgender people in here. Individuals who are born female and change to their gender to male are not required to register. But U.S. citizens of immigrants who are born male and change their gender to female are still required to register. That is weird. Okay, but if you were a girl and you decide to, if you're a man and you decide to go to be a female, Bruce Jenner had to register, I guess then. Okay, hospitalized or incarcerated men, young men in hospitals, mental institutions, or prisons do not have to register while they are committed. However, they must register within 30 days after being released if they have not yet reached their 26th birthday. I can't think of anybody I'd rather be on a firing line with was a guy who just got out of a mental institution for 30 days and had to register. Anyway, women aren't required to register. Selective Service law as it's written now refers specifically to male persons. Isn't that kind of, we're supposed to be equal. And so forth, and say will be drafted. For women to be required to register with Selective Service, Congress would have to amend their law. Now, they have a bill there now. The chance of that bill ever seeing the light of day are about like a fireball in the coldest place in the world. I mean, it's just not or the cold, or a snowball in hell, I guess you want to go that way, of ever been passed. Men, now this is where it gets really strange. Men before 1960, March 29th, 1957 through December 31st, 1959, were not required to register with the Selective Service system because the registration program was suspended. So anybody born during that period of time does not have to register. The requirement to register with Selective Service was reinstated in 1980, but only for men born January 1st, 1960 or later. So that whole group, since there wasn't a Selective Service, had to get by with it. It's amazing. Today, 24th of May, 2017, in Congress, there's a bill to require women to register, as I already mentioned. But let me ask you this. They're saying it's not a chance to it'll ever get passed. But who saw women at that time, or even today? Well, now we have. But who back then saw women would be assigned to combat units? Women have always served in harm's way, the nurses and people who actually served. But now there is no such place as a safe place, but they're having women who are now serving officially in infantry units and combat units and so forth. Serving, we never thought about that. So it sounds to me like the equality is coming on, and there very well may be women required to be drafted. Right now, I guess they are still getting enough men to register for and be in the military. So that's the draft and so forth. And it's kind of some strange rules in there that I didn't realize and so forth. But let's talk about now the second group, second part of our show. Hello, remember me? Some people call me Old Glory. Others call me the Star Spangled Banner. But whatever they call me, I am your flag, the flag of the United States of America. And I tell you what, when you're in the service and you're in a foreign land, there's nothing but makes you feel better to see that flag flying. The Star Spangled Banner on September 14th, 1814, the U.S. soldiers at Baltimore's Fort McHenry raised a huge American flag to celebrate a crucial victory over British forces during the War of 1812. The sight of those broad stripes and bright stars inspired Francis Scott Key to write a song. And that eventually, over some period of years, became the national anthem. Key's words gave new significance to a national symbol and started a tradition through which generations of Americans have invested the flag with their own meanings and memories. Now let's talk about how that got there. This is actually a photograph of that flag. Francis Scott Key wrote the words to the Star Spangled Banner on the back of the envelope. The music from this poem, or what he is, I think it's interesting because it came out of they were fighting the English, and the music for this song came out of an English drinking song called Answeron in Heaven. He was not imprisoned on a British ship, as a lot of people thought. It's also one of those myths when he planned this verse. In his capacity as a Washington, D.C. lawyer, Key had been dispatched by the President, James Madison, on a mission to Baltimore to negotiate for the release of Dr. William Beans, a prominent surgeon captured at the Battle of Bladensburg. The flag Key held as the twilight's last gleaming did not fly through the perilous fight, as his song does. In addition to a thunderstorm of bombs, a torrent of rain fell on Fort McHenry throughout the night on the Battle of Baltimore. The fort's 30 by 42-foot garrison flag was so massive that it required 11 men to hoist them when dry. If it was waterlogged, the woolen banner, they didn't have nylon then, could have weighed up to 500 pounds and snapped the flagpole. So as the rain poured down, a small storm flag that measured 17 feet by 25 feet, which is still a pretty good sized flag, flew in its place. But in the morning, as the mist started turning away, the rain-soaked flag was taken down, and that big flag was raised, and that's the flag that Francis Key saw in the morning as the sun was coming up in the fog. Now, the song was not originally entitled Star Spangled Banner. When Key scrawled his lyrics on the back of a letter he pulled from his pocket on the morning of September 14th, he did not give it any title. Within a week, Key's verse was printed on broadsides and in Baltimore newspapers under the title Defense of Fort McHenry. In November, a Baltimore music store printed the patriotic song with sheet music for the first time under the more lyrical title Star Spangled Banner. So that's how the Star Spangled Banner came about. He didn't name it. It was some publisher in the music store. The original national anthem had 4 verses. The version of Star Spangled Banner, traditionally sung on patriotic occasions and at sporting events, is only the song's first verse. So all this time, when you hear the song, you only hear the first verse. All 4 verses were concluded with the same line: "O'er the land of the free and home of the brave." In 1861, poet Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote a 5th verse to support the Union cause of the Civil War and denounce the traitors that dared to defile the flag of her stars. In other words, he did not like the South. The Star Spangled Banner did not become the national anthem until more than a century after it was written, along with Hail Columbia and Yankee Doodle Dandy. The Star Spangled Banner was among the prevalent patriotic airs in the aftermath of the War of 1812. During the Civil War, the Star Spangled Banner was an anthem for Union troops, and the song increased in popularity in the ensuing decades, which led President Woodrow Wilson to sign an executive order in 1916 designating it as a national anthem of the United States for all military ceremonies. Now, I got that highlighted because it's important to realize that was for all military ceremonies. On March 3rd, 1931, after 40 previous attempts failed, a measure passed Congress and was signed into law that formally designated the Star-Spangled Banner as the national anthem of the United States. Let's talk about Key a little bit. Key opposed America getting into the War of 1812 against England on its own. Ironically, the man who created one of the last patriotic legacies of the War of 1812 adamantly opposed the conflict at its outset. Key referred to the war as abominable, my southern tongue, and a lump of wickedness. However, his opposition to the war softened after the British began to raid nearby Chesapeake Bay. It's amazing how your opinions can change when it comes close to your home. In 1813, 1814. Then he briefly served in Georgetown wartime militia. He was not a big-time songwriter. He was a one-hit wonder. See, he was tone deaf. Was much more adept in his legal job than he was an amateur poet. And he didn't write this as a poem, he wrote it as a song, because he already knew he couldn't write a poem. Much of the odes he composed were never meant to be seen by beyond family and friends, and none came remotely close to realizing the popular fame of Star-Spangled Banner. In addition to being a middling poet, Key also had a hard time carrying a tune. I can relate to that. Key's family said he was not musical, which means he was tone deaf, and I can relate to that very well. That's one of the reasons I'll never be able to speak Vietnamese. Now, as we mentioned a while ago, Flag Day is coming up June 14th. What does that entail? The first celebration of the U.S. flag's birthday was held in 1877 on the 100th anniversary of the flag resolution of 1777. However, it is believed that the first annual recognition of the flag's birthday dates back to 1885 when schoolteacher B.J. Singran was first organized a group of Wisconsin school children to observe June 14th, the 108th anniversary of the official adoption of the Stars and Stripes as the flag's birthday. Wondering why it was the 108th rather than 100th, okay? I won't there, so. Truman, now known as the father of Flag Day, continued to publicly advocate the observance of June 14th as the flag's birthday, or Flag Day, for years. In 1916, the anniversary of the flag resolution of 1777 became a national observed event by proclamation by President Woodrow Wilson. However, it was not designated as National Flag Day until August 3rd, 1949, with the Act of Congress designated June 14th of each year as National Flag Day. Okay. The U.S. Flag Code formalizes and unifies the traditional ways in which we give respect to the flag. And that code has been, well, let's put it this way, it's been bastardized so much that it's hard to know how you're supposed to do the flag, when, and so forth. It also contains specific instructions on how the flag is not to be used. And the following is a list of do's and don'ts associated with the Old Glory, the U.S. flag. When displaying the flag, do the following. Display the U.S. flag from sunrise to sunset on buildings and stationary flagstaffs in the open. When a patriotic effect is desired, the flag may be displayed 24 hours a day if properly illuminated during the hours of darkness. In other words, it needs to be spotlighted. Now, when the flag is placed on a single staff or lanyard, place the United States flag above all flags, okay, if you're in a group. When flags are displayed in a row, such as in a parade, the U.S. flag goes to the observer's left, or its own right. Flags of other nations are flown at the same height. State and local flags are traditionally flown lower. So when the American flag flies and the Mexican flag flies, they should be flying, according to this, at the same level. But the state flags, the POW flag, Army, Navy flags all should be flying lower. When used during a marching ceremony or parade with other flags, the U.S. flag will be on the observer's left, okay? It's on, again, you can always remember the flag should be on its own right. On special days, the flag may be flown at half staff. On Memorial Day, it is flown at half staff until noon and then raised. Now, there are rules to flying at half-staff. When flown at half-staff, the flag should be hoisted to the peak for an instant and then lowered to the half-staff position. The flag should be again raised to the peak before it's lowered for the day. By half-staff is meant lowering the flag to 1/2 the distance between the top and bottom of the staff. And I wonder how many times it is flown at half-staff, it goes all the way up and comes back down, and then when they take it down, it goes all the way up and comes back down. That'd be interesting to see. When the flag is displayed over the middle of the street, it should be suspended vertically with the Union blue field, that's the Union, of stars to the north and an east and west street to on the east and a north and south street. Well, that could be confusing. When placed on the podium, the flag should be placed on speaker's right or the staging area. Other flags should be placed on the left. Now, I'm certain y'all writing all this down so you'll be ready to go Flag Day. You can always go back into to a website and pull up archives and see these rules again. When displayed either horizontally or vertically against a wall or other flat surface, the Union blue field of stars should be uppermost and to the flag's own right. This is the observer's left. When displayed in a window, it should be displayed in the same way, with the Union or blue field to the left of the observer's street. When the flag is displayed on a car, the staff should be fixed firmly to the chassis or clamped to the right fender. Now, you see all these flags now that go in the back window on these plastic things, and there's a lot, you find a lot of flags on the ground where they were mounted that way, and people forget and put the window down, which was the incorrect way. When the flag's used to cover a casket, it should be so placed that the Union is at the head and over the left shoulder. The flag should not be allowed into the grave or allowed to touch the ground. When saluting the flag, do the following. All persons present in uniform, military, police, fire, and so forth should render a military salute. Members of the armed forces and veterans who are present but not in uniform may render the military salute. That's a fairly recent change, but veterans also now are allowed to do the military salute. All other persons present should face the flag and stand at attention with the right hand over their heart, or if inapplicable, remove their headdress with the right hand and hold it at the left shoulder, then hand over the heart. Now let's talk about some don't do's. When storing or disposing of the flag, fold the traditional triangle for storage. Don't just wad the flag up and put it away. Fold it properly, which gets into another story. Don't think I might have time to tell you about it, but anyway, the VFW, American Legion, and Boy Scouts offer the following instructions for proper disposal of a worn flag. The flag should be folded in its customary manner. Don't dip the U.S. flag for any person, flag, or vessel. Don't let the flag touch the ground. Don't fly a flag upside down unless there's an emergency. Don't carry the flag flat or carry things in it. Don't use it as a rag to carry things. Don't use the flag as clothing. In other words, don't take a flag and make clothing out of it, which brings up to the point from what I have read that it's okay to have a flag sewn on your clothes, but don't take a flag and make clothes out of it and make clothing out of it itself. Don't store the flag where it can get dirty. Don't use it as a cover. Don't use it as a tablecloth or anything else. Don't fasten it or tie it back. In other words, it's not like curtains. Don't draw on or otherwise mark the flag. Don't use the flag for decorations. Use the bunting with the blue on top, then white, then red. The bunting you can see at the stores. Now, in the event of a president or former official of the government of any state, territory, or possession of the United States, the governor of that state, territory, or possession of the United States, the governor of that state, territory, or possession, which I've got again, may proclaim the national flag flown at half staff. I was always wondering if the governor could do it, because it seems like we fly the flag down at half staff for just about everybody. Now okay, wrong way again. There you go. Let's talk about folding the flag. There's the flag. Hold the flag flat between two people. Then, first fold the fold over so that you see the stripes on top from your point of view. Then, second fold is fold across again so that you now see the stripes and the Union. Continue to fold in a triangle. Now keep it tight as you fold that triangle. Continue to fold in a triangle and slowly walk towards the other person while folding. If you've never seen one at a military funeral, it's something to see. Fold until the union is visible and tuck in the end. Now, when you go to a military funeral, you can see them folded and so forth. What are the meanings of those folds? The first fold of the flag is a symbol of life. The second fold is a symbol of our beliefs in eternal life. The third fold is made to honor and remembrance of the veteran departing our ranks and who gave the portion of his or her life in defense of our country to obtain peace throughout the world. Now, this came from the American Legion. So this is what you would normally see at a funeral. You see the flag draped coffin. You see the color guard or the pallbearers carrying the casket with the flag folded up so you can get it. And you see the casket in place with the military there folding the flag, which is then presented by one of the folders to the officer in charge, who then in turn presents it to the family members. And this is one of the cases that should be kept in and so forth. Okay. According to the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, the United States flag is provided without charge to cover the casket or accompany the urn of any deceased veteran. The purpose of the flag is to honor the services of the veteran. Now, that means that the Veterans Affairs is supposed to furnish you, your family, the flag, which is usually taken care of by the funeral home. I know that the post office also carries some of the casket flags on hand. Who is eligible for a burial flag? Basically, everybody that was a veteran, other than dischargeable discharge, dishonorable discharge is not qualified. Note, this includes veterans who served in the Philippines military forces while such forces were in the service of the United States Armed Forces under the President's order of July 16, 1941, and on after April 25, 1951, and veterans who served in the Philippines military or eligible for burial in a national cemetery, if there's an opening for it. Okay. Veterans who are entitled to retired pay for service in the reserve or would have been entitled to such pay, but not for being under 60 years of age. Former members of the Selective Reserve, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, Marine Corps, or Naval Reserve, Air National Guard, or Army National Guard, who served at least one enlistment or, in their case of an officer, the period of initial obligation, who were discharged for disability, incurred or aggravated in line of duty, or died while a member of the Selective Reserve. Now, the Pledge of Allegiance was written in August 1892 by Socialist Minister Francis Bellamy, who lived from 1855 to 1931. By Socialist Minister Francis Bellamy. It was originally published in the Youth's Companion on September 8, 1892. Bellamy had hoped the pledge would be used by citizens of any country, not just here, but any country. Its original form, it read, "I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." In 1923, the words, "the flag of the United States of America," were added. At this time it read, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." In 1954, in response to the communist threat of those times, President Dwight Eisenhower encouraged Congress to add the words, "under God," creating the 31 pledge we say today. Bellamy's daughter objected to this alteration, but today it reads, "I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." And there's still controversy today about under God, people won't take it out and so forth. The original salute, first described in 1892 by Bellamy, who did it, was to, after reciting the words to the flag, the arm was extended towards the flag, kind of like this, which during World War II was like the Nazi salute, so that was not going to happen. So then they changed it to the salute that you have now, the right hand salute and so forth. Okay. The flag code states the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag should be rendered by standing at attention, facing the flag with the right hand over the heart. When not in uniform, men should be removed in non-religious headdress with the right hand on the left shoulder, the hand bent over the heart. Persons in uniform remain silent, face the flag, and render a military salute. The rule has been modified, as I mentioned a while ago, to allow veterans and civilian codes to salute. And as you know, this coming Monday is Memorial Day. And there's the pledge, as we said today. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I think the pledge and the national anthem should be played at all sporting events. Now, that's our show tonight. Looking forward to being back on the 14th, and I'm trying to get a guest. I've had several people that lined up. But in the meantime, enjoy Memorial Day. Go out and go to some of the events. If you're in Raleigh, there are lots of events going on. The Marines will have an event going on at 11 o'clock, I believe it is, at the War Memorial on the State Capitol grounds. North Carolina Vietnam Veteran Incorporated will have an event right after that at the Vietnam Memorial. And I know that different cemeteries all around are having one. There's going to be one at the National Cemetery, which is quite special here in Raleigh. So enjoy your Memorial Day off, but remember while you're having Memorial Day. And thank you, and good night.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.